So welcome. We're going to look at punishment. We're going to look at the best practice in punishment, how best to use it, what we can use to drive development. Now, I really wanted to call this blame-driven development, but apparently BDD has already been used, so I couldn't. So in order to deal with that, I stole a bit of BDD back again. So as an example of punishment-driven development, we have, given that a team isn't delivering fast enough, when you have told them time and time again how important this is, then you punish them with no bonus and bad performance reviews, just as an example. So, one of the things that's happened to me in one of the organisations I worked in is whenever something went wrong in production, one of the first things they did was to say to me, get it sorted, we'd get it sorted, we'd get it there. And then the second thing was, who's to blame? Who caused this? Who did something that made this happen? To which my response is, actually, it really doesn't matter who's to blame, who caused this specific problem. The question is, how did it happen? Why did it happen? What can we do to stop it from happening again? Who's had a manager who's sort of asking this type of question in that type of circumstance? Oh, only a couple. That's actually really low. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Okay, so the next thing I have for you guys is a challenge. One is, what is that music? Okay, so I need a volunteer one from each side. And this is a totally unfair challenge because there's different numbers sat on each side. But thank you. You can have those. And a volunteer from this side. Thank you. So, your challenge is to distribute one of these cards, exactly one only, to every single person on your side of the team. On your side, they're your team. You as a team will win if you're the fastest team to get it done. It's not that these guys win. I know, it's very unfair, isn't it? But you know what? Life isn't fair. And everyone should know, everyone should have exactly one, not at least one. Stop trying to change the acceptance criteria. And I need to have the spare cards back again. All right, ready? Go. Ah, you see, there's some clever techniques happening on this side. You do realise this is a competition, right? Because it's nice seeing a bit of teamwork on this side, trying to get it all sorted. Oh, who's going to win? And everyone on this side, hold up your card. Sorry. So your punishment is just to feel deeply ashamed of yourselves, okay, for not achieving a high performance in that particular task. So, it's the honour of being the best team. It's very worthwhile. Okay, so why have you got these cards? Now your team's the worst team. And if you guys just come in the back, you're going to want a card. Just pass them some cards. Backwards, thank you. Okay, so we're going to do an experiment. And that's why you have the cards. I'm experimenting on you. Each card has got two sides. One is red and one is green. If you show me the green card during this, it means that it's a low answer. And you'll understand a little more when we do the first part of the experiment. And if you show me the red side of the card, that means it's high. So we will start with the first one and you'll understand what it is I'm trying to do. So we will have 5 scenarios during this presentation. And after each one, you will tell me how blameworthy John is. John does a lot of things during this presentation. And also how much punishment he deserves. So you've got low and high for each of those. All right? So John is at a football game. Sees another fan, Steve. He's wearing a scarf of the opposing team. We all know that's completely unacceptable. So John tells him to take that scarf off. He refuses and John hits him. So how blameworthy is John for that action? So you can show me red if you think he's highly to blame for that, or green if you think he's not much to blame for that action. So show me your cards. So we have, in fact, the good team are almost entirely red, except for you two guys, just to let you know. And the new good team is mostly red, although there was a little patch of green in the middle there, so I'd watch out if you're sitting around there. And given that we generally as a whole think he's actually quite blameworthy for that action, how much punishment does he deserve? Bear in mind, the top punishment is life in prison, because I don't believe in the death penalty, so we're not having that one on there. Life in prison is the absolute top. No punishment at all is the absolute bottom. So maybe, I don't know, 10 years in prison is about the middle. So show me the green side if you think he shouldn't be punished too much, or the red side if you think he deserves more severe punishment. Okay, generally green. You're quite harsh. Over 10 years in prison. That's but you know, people view differently. So, in the same way that we were hearing earlier that there might be some strange friends who might enjoy some punishment, also, I have strange friends on Facebook as well, as we're about to see. I went out to my Facebook and out on Twitter and asked them these same questions. I got them to go out and fill in a questionnaire. There'll be punishment for you afterwards, don't worry. And I got them to tell me how blameworthy, they did exactly these same scenarios and asked them to tell me how blameworthy and how much punishment, but they were scoring between 1 and 9 rather than just high and low. And this is a bubble diagram of their results. So generally, the bigger the bubble, the more people felt that. So generally, people agreed with you guys. So generally, they felt he was blameworthy for what he did, but he didn't deserve that much punishment, although you'll be glad to see you're not on your own in thinking he actually deserved quite a lot of punishment. We did have a few people here who felt he wasn't blameworthy at all. That's maybe just my friends for you. Okay, so I want to start looking at some examples of punishment as I've seen them. So it was actually at an open space in Agile Prague that I was talking to a product owner last year. And we were talking about how to motivate people, you know, are bonuses the way to go? You know, how do you actually reward people for what they're doing? And he told me about a fantastic bonus scheme. And this scheme has you, he's the product owner. So for every single bug that he finds in the system, he docks the bonus of the person who wrote that and the tester for that. So your bonus is inversely proportional to the number of issues found in UAT. Okay? He thought this was fantastic and was advocating it to other people. So, and actually, it was on the way back from Agile Prague that I thought of this presentation because it kind of brought these issues up for me. So I've imagined his team. So we have Alfred and Betty and Charles and Diana, because why not? So we have Alfred. Alfred is a reasonably new graduate. He's pretty good technically, but obviously doesn't have much experience. He's needs quite a lot of support in how we do things around here. What effect is this bonus scheme going to have on him? Any thoughts?
Stop learning.
He is unable to improve the quality of his code on his own. It's not a choice that he's making. He's doing the best that he can do. He needs help from other people. He needs to learn and to work and to have the space to do that in. And to have his bonus docked when he's absolutely trying his best and he's learning lots and he's coming along seems unfair. So it's probably quite demotivating for Alfred. We then have Betty. Now, Betty has actually got some issues going on outside work, and she's coming in, she's doing the work that she can do, but her mind is elsewhere right now. She cannot be concentrating on work, major issues outside of work. So what effect is this bonus going to have on Betty?
Even more stress.
It probably will give her more stress. One thing's for sure, it's not going to have any positive impact on the quality of her code. And then we have Charles. Now, Charles is lazy. He's actually really good, but he can't be bothered to write much code normally. So what impact is this going to have on him? Absolutely. If he writes no code, he gets a bonus. And then we have Diana. So Diana is actually the star programmer in this team at the moment. She's fantastic. She absolutely always does her top work. She helps everybody else in the team. She really is a team player. She's everything that you would want from a developer. So what impact is this going to have on her? Sorry?
She stops helping others.
She may stop helping other people and concentrate on her own code instead. That's actually the worst case scenario, is that she does that. The best case scenario is she carries on exactly as she was before. But actually what's likely to happen is that she stands back and says, are you telling me I'm not writing good code already? This is partly, I think, the product owner came up with this approach to bonuses, not understanding about intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, assuming that everybody, for one, isn't going to do a good job unless you pay them extra to do it, and for two, is completely money-oriented. That was his mistake. Most people are not money-oriented. They want to know that you think they've done a good job. They want recognition for what they've done. And most people will do the best that they can do. And if this bonus scheme is only rewarding people who are lazy, then it's not really a great bonus scheme. And in my view, is a form of punishment. In fact, there are lots of studies that have shown that if you take something that people are intrinsically motivated to do, such as write high-quality code, and you extrinsically motivate them to do it, it demotivates them. Okay, why do we punish people? Any ideas why we punish people? Because they're lazy. Okay,
Because
so
it makes us feel better.
because it makes us feel better. Okay, so that's a blaming type thing, but let's think about actual punishing. So we might blame them, but that doesn't mean we necessarily punish them. So we're in a scenario now where we are punishing them. And this can be wider than just software. Why would we punish people?
Because we bring justice.
For justice. Who for?
We want them to learn and not to do this.
Learn not to do it again. Absolutely.
Know what to do. It's the only choice.
Okay, okay.
Because it shows our power.
So, according to the literature, there are 4 reasons why we punish people. So one is to stop other people from doing the same thing. It's a signal to people that this is not a good thing, we don't want you to do this. The next one is so that that person won't do it again. For retribution, which was one of the first ones that we had through, because it feels good, and to compensate the victim. So that might be a scenario where somebody was mugged, and then maybe we punish somebody by fining them and giving the money to the victim, something of that ilk. I would argue that the vast majority of punishment that we see in the office is for retribution. People may well argue it's to stop them doing it again, but most of the time it's about making us feel better that somebody's been punished for doing that. Okay, I worked with a team, and we had a situation where all of the team got on well except for one member of the team. That one member of the team was not as quick on the uptake as the other guys. He wouldn't stick to team decisions. So we'd be in a meeting, the team would make a decision, he would be part of that, and then he'd go off and do something different. Nobody wanted to work with him. Nobody liked him. Nobody had any respect for him in the team, and he knew it. Not a happy team. So he would also ask lots of stupid questions. Whenever you went for a meeting to talk about the requirements, he was asking the most basic stupid questions. And at some point, somebody would shut him down and just say, stop asking questions. So what we did was we said, let him ask his questions. Don't shut him down. Let him finish asking his questions. What we found was around a third of the time, he found fundamental issues with the way in which we were thinking of doing something by asking those basic questions. And as that started to come out and the team started to understand that actually he was adding some value here, we started to do other things as well. So he didn't stick to the decisions that were made in the meeting. My husband is actually just about into the Asperger's side of the spectrum, and one of the things he finds is that verbal decisions don't seem very real to him. He knows they've been made, he knows they're decisions, but they don't feel real because they're only verbal. And one of the things we started doing with this team was, if any decisions were made during that meeting, we just sent a quick email afterwards with a couple of bullet points of these are the decisions we made. And he stuck to every single one of those decisions after we started doing that. And he moved from being the odd one out that nobody wanted to work with to actually being that unique person in the team who was really bringing his own value. And I think we do this a lot. I see this kind of thing quite a lot in teams where there's somebody who just thinks differently than the rest of the team, and they end up being ostracised and they end up not performing to their potential within the team. Scenario 2, okay. So John and Steve are now out hunting in the woods. They've obviously gotten over the scarf incident. So John has followed all of the safety rules, but his shotgun misfires, hits Steve in the side, and Steve dies. Okay? Strangely enough, he seems to get resurrected later in the presentation, but for now he's dead. Okay? So how blameworthy is John for this? Green for low, red for high. Okay, we've got a couple of red, we've got a few red, mainly green. Okay, and how much punishment does he deserve? Low, a couple of high. Oh, more highs than there were. So we think he probably wasn't that much at fault, but we do have a few, we do have a few people who think he should still be punished quite severely for it, although the majority think he shouldn't.
Excuse me? Is
Yeah.
green high or low?
Green is low. I might need to punish you for that as well. No. So hopefully we've all been voting in that way, otherwise all of the results are invalid. So you can see from my strange Facebook friends that they felt that generally he wasn't very blameworthy for it, and also that he didn't deserve much punishment. But you can also see there's a pretty linear thing here. Generally, if people felt he was more guilty, then he should be punished more with this particular one. And you can see there's one person, in fact, in this scenario, who felt that he was very blameworthy and should absolutely go to prison for life. And that was somebody who knew that you should never point your gun at somebody, even if you think it's not loaded and that everything's safe. So that was a sort of personal thing. Okay. I will at some point explain to you why we're doing this experiment, but self-punishment. One of the organisations I worked at, there was a particular system we put live, and one of the main developers on that system wanted to test that it was working properly, and was playing with it. He then went on to the test environment just to check something and put something through, only he wasn't on the test environment, he was on the live environment. He realised he'd done it, he raised the issue, we ran around deleting things to stop this person getting a letter to offer them a new mortgage deal, which would have been a bit of a surprise to them given that they hadn't asked for one. And he, for weeks afterwards, blamed himself really badly for it. He still has a post-it note up at his desk saying, "Do not go on live." And he was so shamed that he'd done this. But this wasn't his fault. This was our fault. If you've got a test system which has the same data in it as the live system, and if you've got a scenario where it's not about logging in, but it's about knowing about your account, and if you've not got the background colours of your system looking different in different environments so that you see this is now blue instead of red, so it's obviously not the system you think it's going to be on, then you will get these kinds of mistakes. And the problem there is with the system and what we had done. So the answer to that is to go in and make those changes so that it's obviously visually different. Add in more layers of protection for people so that this won't happen again. This isn't about he's done a bad thing. We spent about the next 2 weeks telling him all the stories of all the horrific things all of us have done in our time in tech. And I think if we took everyone in this room, probably everyone has a horrific story of something that they've done that's affected lots of people. I'm not sure it made him feel any better, but this self-punishment is not helpful. This self-punishment is part of the problem. So Freud had a theory called narcissism of small differences. This is effectively what he's saying is everybody needs to be an individual. Everybody wants to feel that they are an individual, that they're different from other people. And what that means is we tend to grow a dislike of people who are very like us, but they're just different in one way, maybe. Because that makes us feel more individualistic, even though what we're doing is forming a group in doing that, so we're not even being an individual in that scenario. And one organisation I work with absolutely had that, and they played the game of blame the BA. Any of you guys recognise this game? It's really rife in this particular organisation. And, perhaps sometimes it is their fault. Perhaps. But how helpful is that, blame the BA? It's not helpful. It doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't actually sit down and say, how can we stop this happening again? All it does is make you feel better that you can all agree it's one person's fault, and then you can move on. Scenario 3. John drives a security van. Steve, who's been resurrected from the dead, he kidnaps John's daughter, and he's threatening to kill her. And so in order to save his daughter's life, Steve takes the money from the van, he steals it, and he gives it to John. He gives it to Steve. So John has stolen the money from the van, and he's given it to Steve. So how blameworthy is John? Pretty much green, there's a few reds. And how much punishment does John deserve? Again, pretty much green with the odd red. And you can see my Facebook friends agree with you all. This next one is Yes But Man, I like to call him. This is when, for my sins, for a couple of years I was a project manager. And this particular guy, I would work with the main teams that I worked with, and I'd work really well with them, and they would do things. This guy actually ran one of the COBOL teams. So very rarely did we need to interact with the COBOL, but there was occasionally a little bit of change that we needed in the COBOL system in order to support our development. And so I would need to go and talk to this guy and ask him to do this work for me and tell him when it was that I needed it by, and he would say, yes, that's absolutely fine, we'll get that done. And I'd go in advance and remind him it was needed. Why are you even asking me again? I've said yes, it's absolutely fine. And then I'd turn up when it was supposed to be there, and he'd say, oh, we had far more important things to do. We didn't get around to that. Every single time. And I actually tried lots of different approaches with this guy. How could I actually get him to do what I needed him to do? Any suggestions of things that I could have done? That was very tempting. It was very tempting. Maybe that was my next step after the thing that eventually worked. Unfortunately, I wasn't in a position to punish this guy. I was a temporary member of staff. He had been there forever, and he knew his job was safe. He had that. So absolutely. So I'm a project manager he's a COBOL team leader. I need to find something to help him with. That's I guess, the difficulty in that scenario. But absolutely, that's a good way through. Any other thoughts? I could have done that. I'm ashamed to say I've never thought of doing that. So I've learned something from today. So thank you all. I tried all sorts of different things, but the one that worked in the end was effectively, not actual verbally, but effectively, I said to him, "I'm so stupid. You're so amazing. I'm a bit ditzy. I should have asked you before. Can you do me a favour? You know, because you are so amazing and wonderful. You know, could you do this for me? Because, I'm just a bit stupid, really." And he would sit and smile his little smug smile, while inside I'm thinking, "You sad, sad man." And then he would do whatever it was that I needed him to do. And I think, great. I found a way now of getting done what I want to get done. And I guess this is all about knowing yourself. So obviously we have to, in a agile/lean conference, have the odd Japanese word up there. So this is all about knowing yourself and saying, what do I want out of this situation? Not emotionally. So a lot of punishment, I think, comes from emotion. That retribution, that wish to be, because maybe you've been belittled by the action that they've taken, or you've got that emotional response. What I'm talking about here is standing back from that, ignoring that emotion, or using that emotion as a signal that you need to do this. Stand back and say, what do I need from this? What can I do? As you were suggesting, what can I give him that will make him want to do this? In this scenario, I just fed his ego. And that's actually what he wanted. And what that meant was, I got what I wanted. I didn't get retribution. I didn't get the satisfaction of knowing I had made him pay for being like that, but I got exactly what I wanted out of him, whilst thinking, "You sad, sad man," so it was all good. Scenario 4. So you felt quite sorry for John after the last one, didn't you? So John has been planning to kill his mother for the inheritance. He's dragged her to her bed. He's lit her oxygen mask, because she's not even very well. He could have just waited, with his cigarette. He wants to make it look like an accident, and she burns to death. Okay? How much is he to blame for this? There is I can see that green. Yeah, you too. Cheeky. And how much punishment does he deserve? Okay, I think we're pretty much agreed. My Facebook friends are pretty much agreed with you, except that I do have rather a worrying one here. I'm not sure exactly who it was, because it was an anonymous response, but I think I should just cut off contact with all of them, just in case. Say again, sorry?
Maybe this person knew John's mother and she wasn't that good person.
Maybe John's mother wasn't a good person, that's true. Yeah, you're right. So, angry man. I joined an organisation. In my first 2 weeks at the organisation, I was in a meeting, there were about 10 of us in there, and we were discussing a subject. Now, this guy, I knew it was my team that needed to change the way we were working. We weren't serving them in the way that we needed to. And he'd spoken to me a week or two before about the issues that he had. So we'd had a think and a talk about what we might be able to do. So that's what this meeting was about, to discuss. And so I started to explain what we were thinking and where we were at. And this guy became really, really angry. And I didn't know why. He was just absolutely, incessantly angry. Now, he was holding it under control. He wasn't standing up and shouting at me and all sorts of things and physically trying to beat me up or anything. But his voice was incredibly angry. He was having real trouble controlling his voice. And I honestly had no idea why. And I'd never been in that type of situation before. I'm only 2 weeks into the job. I don't know anyone else in that room very well either. So I kind of just carried on the meeting as if it wasn't happening. I don't know if that was the right thing to do or not, but he got increasingly more and more angry until he had to leave the room, and he left. And his boss was in the room as well, so, this was, and I kind of looked around everybody in the room and went, can anyone tell me what that was about? And they all went, I have no idea. So it was a bit of a relief for me. At least I wasn't obviously being stupidly bad about something. But I had no idea what was upsetting him. None at all. So any suggestions in how I should have handled that? So I could have gone and asked him why he had behaved that way. Anything else? Sorry. I absolutely could have done that. I felt like that. I could
His
tell you.
mother.
Burn his mother, yeah? I think that would have, then he would have got the inheritance, and that might have cheered him up, that's true. Sorry, there was another one over here. Throw darts at him. Yeah, I like that one. Mm?
Address his
So have a short break and then talk to him.
address his anger, like explicitly. So saying, I can see you're upset. Can
Yeah.
you tell me what's upset?
So that suggestion for those that couldn't hear is that I sort of said to him, I can see you're upset. What is it that's upsetting you? So during the meeting, as I said, I chose not to respond to it. I don't know that I chose so much as I had no idea what to do, so I kind of just carried on pretending it wasn't happening. But actually, I don't think it would have been the right thing to do to sort of say to him in the meeting, what is it that's making you angry? Because he was so angry that I think that would have stopped him from holding it in. And anything which is going to make him lose his self-respect more is not going to be a useful thing. I also thought about, well, I could have gone to my manager, I could have gone to HR and said, this behaviour is totally unacceptable. Nobody should be treating me this way. I'm new to the job, I'm in here. Nobody should be speaking to me like that, whether I'm new to the job or not. I could have done that. I could have gone to him after a break and said, what was it you were angry about? Let's talk about that, let's understand. What I actually did, I thought about it, this was the first thing in the morning meeting. I left him alone for a while. And first thing in the afternoon, I just went to his desk to see him and I said to him, I have absolutely no idea why you were angry this morning, but whatever I did, I'm really sorry. And that's it. I never know to this day what made him angry. I still don't know. But what he did was he smiled at me, he said thank you, and that was the last we ever heard of it. And we had a really good working relationship after that. So for me, that was about, again, me standing back, because I had quite a lot of emotions about this, particularly very new into the job. It's not like I had a lot of a support mechanism already there. But for me, this was about, what do I want out of this? I want to be able to work with this guy. I don't want this hanging over us. I don't want him to blow up at me about something and then that to be between us forever. But I also need him to know that I don't know what I did that made him angry. Because if I do this again, and he thinks I know what I did, then he'll think I'm deliberately doing whatever it was. So to me, this was the best answer that I could come up with. And it worked. Except I'm quite dissatisfied because I actually still don't know what it was that made him angry. And I promise you this is the last Japanese word. So most of us will know about Kaizen and continual improvement. So I'm applying that now to me and what I do and what my responses are to people. And standing back, taking my emotions out of it, because my emotions are not the important thing. I shouldn't be going in telling somebody else their behaviour is unacceptable because it makes me feel better. I should only be going in doing that if actually it's necessary and it's the right thing to do. So all of these things, that happens to be the first thing that I tried with him. But if that hadn't have worked, I would have thought again and gone back and tried something else again. So this is all about trying different things, trying to work out what works. But it's not about me getting satisfaction about going in and knowing I've punished and I've done something righteous. This is the last scenario. So, John and Steve are friends now. They've swept it all under the bridge since the inheritance, I think. They share a competitive streak. They're playing tennis together. And Steve keeps beating John, and John's not really very happy about this. So he deliberately hits the ball at Steve, and Steve ends up with a black eye. So, how blameworthy is John for his actions? Pretty much red. There's a couple of competitive sports people over here and over there. Okay. And how much punishment does he deserve? Okay, some people say more than 10 years in prison. That's nice. But the majority of you are thinking maybe not for a black eye. And you can see, actually, you almost exactly mirror my Facebook friends, which probably just says you are also a very strange group of people. Why have I been asking all of these weird questions and scenarios? It's because I wanted you to understand the types of scenarios that were being asked during this experiment. So this was an experiment which was published last year, looking at what affects the level of punishment that people feel are due when actions happen. So there was a theory that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex was involved in actually that decision. So this group, what they did, they had a electromagnetic coil that they would put on someone's head. And they would sit there with it on their head for about 20 minutes before the experiment started. And sometimes they would turn it on, and sometimes they wouldn't. When they turned it on, it would affect that area of the brain, and it would actually dampen down the activity in that part of the brain. And when they left it off, it was just at its natural level. And they did multiple sessions with each person, so they got them with and without. But the person themselves didn't know whether they were with or without. And what they found was that how they assessed the blameworthiness of John, because it was always John, was the same. So whether or not this area of the brain had been dampened down, they still felt he was just as much to blame for his actions. But if that area of the brain had been dampened down, then they felt he deserved less punishment, consistently, everybody. What that tells us is that the level of activity in that part of our brain is what we use to decide how much punishment someone deserves. This is an electrochemical thing. This isn't a logical, that should always follow this. This is why we all had different answers to each one of those questions. But that area of the brain, one of the things they're considering looking at now is actually maybe we should be measuring how active that part of the brain is in people who actually have to make these sorts of judgments for a living, like a judge. You know, how active is that part of the brain? Because if it's very active, they're going to want to punish more. But it also tells me that this is more in our control than it might otherwise be. If that's just a part of our brain that's a bit more active, well, we can choose whether to listen to that or not to listen to that. If we understand that this isn't just something that's innate and this is absolutely right, that level of punishment is right, but actually stand back from the emotion that drives that and start asking questions about actually what do we want out of this? If we're talking about John going to prison, what do we want out of that? Do we want him locked away so we can't get any more inheritances? Do we want to punish him, in which case he'll probably come out angry and do more things? You know, what is it that we want from punishing him? And I think we've got to ask the same kind of question in the workplace. What is it that we want by punishing somebody for accidentally going on to live and putting in someone's details, thinking that they were on test? What is it we want from that? Because that was an accident. They didn't choose to do it. So if we punish them, it cannot be to stop them doing it again because they didn't intend to do it in the first place. So the only thing it can be is for retribution, for us to feel good that we have actually punished them. So I suggest we get something like this in all of the offices across the world. So this is the punishment-driven development manifesto. So finding out who is to blame over working collaboratively. Retribution over encouraging innovation. Punishing mistakes over avoiding future mistakes, and venting emotions over achieving goals. I also have an alternative, which is the people-driven development manifesto. Respecting people over controlling people. Celebrating mistakes over punishing mistakes. And what I mean by that is not let's do more mistakes so we can celebrate. But when someone's made a mistake, so that developer who went on to live by mistake, that's telling me there's a problem in the way we're working. There's a problem that we need to fix, and that problem's always been there. We just didn't even know it was there. Putting yourself in their place rather than putting others in their place. And changing your behaviour, because that's the only thing that you can change, over trying to change someone else's behaviour, which you cannot. So that's now people-driven development rather than punishment-driven development. And now it's time for questions.
Okay, we even have some time for questions. So. Okay, you can. Oh, there's one.
You almost escaped, look.
Thank you. I just need to understand something small concerning the situation which you said that a lot of our actions where we normally tend to punish somebody or we do something to punish somebody are also influenced mostly by the front cortex of the brain.
Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Okay. Yes. Is it also not influenced by your background?
Absolutely. I mean, they don't know what drives the level of the activity in that part of the brain. So, but absolutely, your view as to what is an appropriate punishment level, absolutely there's influence there from how you're brought up in your society and what you view as acceptable and not acceptable, totally. But that's still your choice. That's still your choice as to whether to listen to those voices or to stand back from those and actually say, why am I doing this? Yeah? Are you... Now that you've come back up here, the other one's right back over there. Oh, sorry. Louise went first.
How much do you think does it come from emotions and maybe how much from the people's value?
Well, I don't know that you can actually split those up. So someone holds values and that gives them an emotional response. So, the values, if you like, they're about who I am. They're about, what I stand for, who I am. So they are not a dynamic thing, they're a static thing. Now, they'll change over time, but right this second, they're there and they're steady. And I'm going to react to a situation because of my values. So my emotional response partially comes out of those values. So I've chosen those values, I get that emotional response, but I still choose whether or not to respond to that emotional response. I still can stand back and say, is that so really silly example, but a few months ago, I got into my car, I was giving my husband a lift somewhere, and he had been the last one to drive the car. It's nothing to do with values, but it's an example of this emotional thing. And I got in, and the seat was in the wrong position. And I was immediately annoyed, because I couldn't just drive my car. And instead of just going, ugh, I just held myself back slightly, and I said to myself, is it reasonable for me to be annoyed about this? And I said, no, I wouldn't want him to drive uncomfortably, and then he'd be unsafe. I was in the car when he drove it. So that's completely unreasonable. So I was then able to just completely let that go. So I didn't need to punish him and snap about it because I realised how unreasonable that was and I was able to let it go. So it's not that you're fighting your own emotions even. It's using those emotions and the speed of those emotions as a signal to say, this is time to just stand back and check in. And actually, if they're reasonable and you want to go with them, then go with them. But you're making that decision to do it. Does that make sense?
So maybe one way is one way is to control the emotions, to train how to, as you said, step back, and the other is to revise your values from time to time. And
Well,
that might
absolutely.
be the
You know,
rational thinking.
I think most people do revise their values from time to time anyway. If you find yourself doing it a lot and getting a lot of those emotional responses, there probably is a signal to stand back and actually have a think about what your core values really are and if they are really where you're wanting them to be. Totally. So there's... He's been trying to ask since the start, I think.
I want to know what you think. If somebody's punished you and you don't feel that was just, what should you do about that?
Ah, interesting. Give me a scenario, give me an example. Sorry, did you have an example of something?
You're John.
I'm John. Which one am I being punished for? So, that's a difficult one. Again, you get emotions in response to that. Something being unfair is probably the worst thing someone can do to me, personally, and that's probably because of my values, because I hold fairness as super high. And I guess it depends. So, okay, here's an example of one. In a work scenario, I was on a conference call with people who, for the organisation I was working for, this was a third-party supplier to that organisation. We were having a very difficult conversation. They weren't delivering the things they'd promised to deliver just the day before. We have a very difficult relationship with them. And we are a very collaborative organisation, so we were trying to work collaboratively with them. And we'd gotten to a point where that wasn't coming back at all. And so we got to a point where I was telling them it was completely unacceptable and we needed to work in a different way. They weren't delivering what we needed them to deliver. And the person on the phone, one of the high-up guys in their organisation, said to me, "I find your language completely unacceptable, and let's move on because I don't want to dwell on that." And actually, my language hadn't been unacceptable at all. I hadn't used any unacceptable language. What I had done is call him on us not getting the deliveries that we'd been promised, etc. And that was unfair to me. It was a form of bullying, trying to shut me down so that I wouldn't carry on talking on the call and move on to something else, whilst appearing to be magnanimous. You know, you've been bad to me, but I'm going to move on and not dwell on that. And what I actually did in that scenario was call him on it straight away. And I said to him, "What about my language hasn't been acceptable?" You know, it didn't let him move on. And he's like, "No." And I'm saying, "No, let's get this sorted first." And obviously he was unable to come up with anything. And what I said is, "You may be finding my tone unacceptable because I'm not happy. And now we can move on." So I guess in that scenario, I just made it fair. But there can be situations where you can't make it fair. And for me, that probably creates the most emotions of all if I was in that situation. Okay? Okay, well, thank you, everybody.